This is the third video in our series about Google Form quizzes, and in this one I'm going to show you how to actually write the questions. So when you first created your Google Form quiz, there's a placeholder for your first question, which you can just click on to edit. And I'm going to start with asking the students what their name is. And Google Forms is quite clever, and it recognizes that that is probably a standard question, and usually we want a short answer text. So just to go through the types of answers that students can give, you can just select it using this box on the right hand side, and usually what I use are either paragraph or multiple choice, occasionally checkboxes. The short answer is what you suspect it's going to be, 1 or 2 words, a sentence at most. And it is fine for questions that you don't intend to be marked by the system or by yourself. So I'm going to use short answer text for surname and first name. The system is supposed to be able to handle short answer questions for questions that are going to be marked as well, but there seems to be a bug within the Google Form system, the quiz system, and it doesn't handle short answer questions properly at the moment. So our experience within the science department is certainly to avoid the short answer question, and even if it is just 1 or 2 words, to use the paragraph instead. Hopefully that bug will be fixed in time and you'll be able to use short answer when it is just a 1 or 2 word answer. So that's surname. To add another question, you just click on the plus button over here, and we'll do another one for first name. And again, it recognizes that as a common question that people often use. You can see the little star in next to surname here. That's because it's a required question, and all you need to do to make it required is to toggle this on here. It might be that during the quiz itself you want to allow students to be able to skip a question if they don't know what the answer is, and so you might want to turn required off for some of your questions, but certainly for the surname and the first name I want them to answer that. Click plus again for another question, and you can type another question if you want. So I don't know, what colour is grass? And now we can have a multiple choice question. So it's defaulting to multiple choice anyway. So we could have red, green, blue, black. So like I say, you can choose whether you want this to be a required question or not. I'm going to say not. And you can add another question. So this time we'll go for a question that perhaps is more open. So what is the name of your favorite book? Now, it's defaulting to short answer using its AI logic, but again, I would suggest turning that to paragraph. And again, make a choice over whether it's required. You can duplicate questions as well. So if you click on that, it just makes a copy of the one you clicked on. So maybe we don't want book. Maybe we could change that to food. And again, it's defaulting to short answer. Again, I would suggest changing that to paragraph. You can at any time also grab the sets of dots at the top, and you can drag a question to change the order. So if you write a question and decide that you'd prefer it in a slightly different sequence, then you can do that. Given that we're teachers and we would like to perhaps put images in this, in these questions, Google does allow that. So you can insert a image into the question itself. So if you just click on this icon, you can upload your own image, or you can do a Google image search. So you can just select from that, insert. Now it's not great, so it tends to not format it particularly well, and it doesn't put it with the text. It kind of gets included just below the text. So you just have to play with that to make it how you want it. You can align it to the left and to the right, which are minor formatting choices. And if you decide that it's not quite right, you can remove it again and swap it for a different one. You can also include images in the answers as well. So a reason for doing that might be that you have lots of different possible tweaks on the same image and you want the student to pick between them. So for instance, one thing that I've done in an electricity quiz is to get the students to pick between these images for which circuit is the right circuit. So what you can do there is use your snipping tool to grab yourself an image. I've made these in PowerPoint, but you could do it on any image that you've got on screen. It's then a little bit cumbersome because you can't Control-C, Control-V into Google Forms, so you have to save it and just give it a name. It doesn't matter what the name is because you're not going to be using it. And then when you toggle back to your quiz, you can now, in your option, upload from your computer. And there's my screenshot. And now I could do that for multiple options going down, and the students could pick the one that they want. A good place to grab questions is often past paper questions from ExamPro or from just a PDF that you've taken from the ExamBoard website, and in which case you then don't necessarily have to type out the question either. You could actually take a snip of the text of the question as well to put up here, and that's often a quick way to turn a paper-based question into a Google Form quiz, not by typing it, but by simply taking snips of the questions. Another drawback of the simplistic editor is that there's no rich text. So if you wanted to write x squared, for instance, you can't. There's no way of doing a superscript within the system. So what I tend to use is a website called LingoJam, which has a superscript generator. So if I wanted to write x squared, I'd do the superscript here. So I put the 2 over here, and then I would just copy and paste the superscript 2 by Control-C, and then back to the quiz. So I type x and then Control-V, and it'll do me a x squared. There's also a subscript generator for the same thing. So if I wanted to refer to oops, not F, 1, so subscript of 1, again I can Control-C that, and F subscript 1, Control-V, and I've got myself a subscript. If you want anything more complicated than subscripts and superscripts, so for instance, in chemistry we often have symbols like this. Unfortunately, you can make it in Word, but then you have to insert it as an image using the snipping tool. A final thing is Greek letters within science, possibly maths as well. It's normal to want to use non-standard letters that you find on the keyboard. Might be the same in French as well, German. You can type it in Word and just copy it across. Finally, if you know any keyboard ASCII codes, you can use those as well. So 3 divide 4. So to make the divide sign, you hold down the Alt key on your keyboard, and while you're holding down the Alt key, you press the numbers 2, 4, and 6, and then release the Alt key. So Alt 2, 4, 6, and the divide sign turns up. There are ASCII codes for most symbols. You just need to Google it, and you'll find a list. Okay, the last thing that I just wanted to talk about writing questions is that all of these questions are self-contained, but quite often we will have questions that have multiple parts, A, B, C, D, and when you're doing that, It's just a question of how you choose to format it. So here's a more complicated quiz where I've got question 1A, question 1B, question 1C. And I could just write them as 1A, 1B, 1C. But occasionally when you're doing questions like this, you have an introduction to the question that you want to put on before you get going. So this is just the preamble at the start of the question, and it isn't a question in its own right. And so if I were to just slot that in before 4A part 1, it wouldn't be clear to the student what that was or which question it was for. So what you can actually do is arrange multiple part questions into what are called sections, which are basically pages. And when the students do the quiz, each section is displayed on its own page with a next at the bottom of the page to go on to the next question. So to create a new section, at the bottom you click on this button here, and when you do that, it now goes on to the next page. And you can actually have your quiz branching if you want to. So dependent on the answers to some of the questions, you can continue to different sections, but most of the time for a quiz we're not going to want to do that. So we've got a new section, so we could call that wherever we're up to, question number 7. And then if there was a preamble for the question, you could write it in there. Or if it's more complicated than simple text, you can click on this, which adds... Oh, that's not right. Sorry, no, that is correct. This now allows you... Oh, no, it's not right. Sorry, I'm getting confused with myself. Not the right box. If you click on Add Image, so this would usually be a cut and snip from the top of an exam paper. You can insert yourself the image there, and you can put text with it to explain the question. And when you do that, it will look like this. Sorry, got slightly confused with myself. Okay, so that's your section headings, and then you can go on to add part A, part B, part C of the questions. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say about writing questions. What we'll go on to next is marking them.